And first, we want to answer a question that many of you have been asking. The League of Women Voters policy is to invite candidates whose name will be on the ballot and garner 10% or more support in a nonpartisan poll. The running mates of gubernatorial candidates Matt Bevin and Jack Conway met tonight's criteria.
Our audience agreed to hold their applause until the debate is over, except for now as we introduce the candidates. First, Republican Jeanine Hampton.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Democrat Sandy Overly.
Thank you.
And the candidates have drawn for the order of speaking tonight. Each candidate will have time for opening remarks before our round of questions and answers. And we will end by letting each candidate then make a closing statement as we round out the evening. And we want to invite you to share your questions and your thoughts throughout the program tonight by using the hashtag KYDebate on Twitter.
All right, let's get this debate underway. Let's start with our opening remarks. First, Democrat Sandy Overly.
Well, it's great to be here this evening. Thank you for having me. I grew up on my family's farm in Bourbon County, and that's where I'm raising my family today. On the farm, my parents taught my brother and I some strong values: honesty, hard work, the importance of a good education, and the value of giving back to our community. And that's why, after working as an engineer and starting my own small business, I took those values and became a voice for hardworking Kentuckians, especially rural families. Small towns and farming communities are the fabric of Kentucky, and that's why I've focused on issues that matter to the people that I grew up with: jobs, infrastructure, fighting Kentucky's drug epidemic, and most importantly, a good education for all of Kentucky's kids. Now I want to take those same values I've practiced all my life to serving Kentucky as your next Lieutenant Governor, alongside Jack Conway. I'm so proud to run with Jack because as our Attorney General, he's proven that he can bring folks together and deliver for Kentuckians. Whether the challenge is good-paying jobs, early childhood education, or making government do more with less, Jack and I will get results for Kentucky. There's so much at stake in this election, but I hope tonight that you will see that the choice about who you can trust is clear. Jack and I understand Kentucky. We've delivered for Kentucky, and we are committed to moving Kentucky forward. Thank you.
Candidate Overly, thank you very much. And now, candidate Jeanine Hampton, you have 2 minutes for your opening remarks.
Well, thank you for hosting us. It's an honor to be here. And I am Jeanine Hampton. I am running for Lieutenant Governor with candidate Matt Bevin. I live in Bowling Green currently with my husband of 15 years, Doyle, who is a retired Air Force flight surgeon. We have 2 grown stepchildren. We have 1 grandchild and 2 cats. I come from humble beginnings in the inner city, and I struggled. I watched my mom struggle, but my 3 sisters and I are all first-generation college. I rose to become an industrial engineer by degree. I served 7 years in the United States Air Force, including deployment to Desert Storm. And I spent 19 years in the corrugated packaging industry, rising from a supervisor to a quality manager, plant manager, and sales. And it was in that sales job here in Kentucky that I saw businesses closing, shrinking, leaving Kentucky for other states or other countries. So I am so pleased to be running with Matt Bevin. Matt and I have a plan, a blueprint for Kentucky, which you can read more at mattbevin.com, M-A-T-T-B-E-V-I-N. We have a plan to increase jobs, to expand opportunity for everyone, and to make Kentucky the magnet for businesses and people that it can be. I look forward as Lieutenant Governor to promoting entrepreneurship, to promoting education, and to being an example to people who don't believe that they can achieve or even pursue the American dream. It's an honor to run, and Matt Bevin and I look forward to improving Kentucky.
Candidate Hampton, thank you very much, and thank you, candidates, for your opening remarks. And now to our questions decided by the League of Women Voters. A reminder that each candidate will have a set amount of time to answer each question. It's a minute 15 each, and then we will have the opportunity for a follow-up if that is necessary.
All right, question one. What do you consider the most significant issue that the new governor will face? And as lieutenant governor, how will you support the governor on that issue? We begin with candidate Hampton.
Well, if you had to choose just one issue, I would point to the $34 billion pension shortfall. That pension shortfall has the ability to derail every other thing that we can do in Kentucky to, even if we improve Kentucky's business climate, if we don't have a solid plan to address the pension shortfall, it can derail those plans. And so Matt and I, in our blueprint, we will address that shortfall. Matt Bevin has hands-on pension fund experience. He started a company that he still runs, and it actually manages some pensions for another state. So he has that experience. He brings that to the table, and I'm really excited. If nothing else, that particular experience alone he can bring to the fore to resolve the pension crisis.
Candidate Overly.
Well, thank you for that question. You know, Jack and I are running as a team, and we're going to govern as a team. I'm proud to run with Jack because we shared the values that I mentioned in my opening statement, and we've wrapped our plans for Kentucky around those values. We believe that the top priority of any governor, and certainly the top priority of our administration, will be to focusing on growing more and better, good-paying jobs for the people here in Kentucky. And along those lines, we have released a jobs plan that you can also find on our website at www.conwayoverly.com. And in that jobs plan, we've articulated how we're going to change the environment here in Kentucky, how we're going to support our local and homegrown industries, how we're going to have additional help for Kentucky's small businesses that create the bulk of the jobs here in Kentucky. We're going to lure new companies to Kentucky, and we're going to create an environment of economic prosperity. So I hope you'll take a look at that jobs plan in detail. Thank you.
Each candidate has 30 seconds for rebuttal. Candidate Hampton, would you like to?
No rebuttal, but I just want to add that as Lieutenant Governor, I will focus on entrepreneurship. I want to promote entrepreneurship, not only to improve the business climate for entrepreneurs within Kentucky and attract them to Kentucky. I want to grow entrepreneurs in our schools. I'd love to see a course in our colleges, a required entrepreneurship course, and I think just doing that, we can set Kentucky on fire and attract the type of businesses and people to Kentucky that we need.
Candidate Overly.
I would say as part of our jobs plan, one thing we also need to do here in Kentucky is make sure we're investing in our people. And Jack and I will make sure that our workforce is getting the training they need to get the jobs that we are recruiting and bringing to our state. So again, I encourage you to take a look at that jobs plan. Thank you.
It's fitting for our next question that we're on a university campus tonight. Kentucky college students graduate from college often with thousands of dollars in student loans and facing that in their lives ahead. Today's economy, though, requires, as they know, a better educated workforce with at least some college or technical training. What will you do to make post-secondary education more affordable in the Commonwealth? And the question is first to Candidate Overly.
Well, thank you, Bill. That is a question that's very personal to me. I have a college freshman at home, and so my family and I are going through what many families here in Kentucky are facing. You know, Jack and I are committed to reviewing Kentucky's education system from top to bottom. And we've also released a jobs plan that you can also find available on our website that talks about what we want to do for all phases of education here in our state. But when it comes to higher ed, we want to hold our colleges and our universities accountable. We want to encourage programs that offer partnerships, a statewide apprentice program, and other opportunities so that students can earn while they learn to help afford the cost of a college education. Thank you.
Thank you. And Candidate Hampton.
Well, as Lieutenant Governor, actually, I understand debt. I had to work my way through school. I worked for General Motors to work my way through college, and then later I worked when I worked for when I earned my MBA. I was actually working full time, and I took out a combination of loans, grants, and scholarships to make that happen. So as Lieutenant Governor and Matt as Governor, we will work to help students understand that they can minimize their debt. There's ways to do that. Sometimes you have to work your way through school, but I would like to strengthen the partnership between the colleges, including the four-year colleges, the two-year colleges, as well as vocational schools. We sometimes talk about vocational training as though it's an afterthought, and it's not. It's a path to a very rewarding career in manufacturing, and right now there are several manufacturing jobs that go unfilled because we don't talk about those jobs. So we will promote that, and you can go to mattbevin.com and read more about our education plan.
All right, Candidate Overly, any response?
Well, I'd say that in addition to those partnership programs I discussed, our statewide apprentice program to help students earn while they learn, we are going to encourage our universities, but also our community and technical colleges, to have conversations with industries in their community so that they know what kind of curricula they need to develop to serve the students in their area, and they can better advise students where the jobs of the future are in their own communities so that they're getting the skills they need to get a job at graduation.
And Candidate Hampton, 30 seconds.
Well, I just want to add, as I was running last year for a different office, I've looked into a lot of the universities and school programs in the Bowling Green area, and that's where I discovered that there is an active partnership already between the 2- and 4-year colleges, as well as between the 2-year colleges and businesses. So, again, I would promote those partnerships and strengthen those partnerships so that students know that they have choices, several choices of a career path.
Our next question deals with child care. Many Kentucky families need quality child care where their children can be safe and learn and grow. Child care subsidies have remained stagnant since the year 2000, making it difficult on many Kentucky working families. What will you and your running mate do to assure quality child care will give these kids a strong start while allowing their parent to continue to work? Candidate Hampton.
Well, on the child care issue, what we first of all need to do is increase the income of the parents. And we do that by strengthening Kentucky's business climate so we attract more businesses to Kentucky, which drives up competition for these workers and increases their wages in the interim. More money in your pocket, you can spend more on child care. In our plan, we're looking at strengthening the overall business climate. I keep coming back to that because it's so important. It's the basis of so many of our problems here in Kentucky. If we can grow our tax base, help our families keep more of what they earn, then they will have more to spend as they see fit.
Candidate Overly.
Well, thank you, Vicki. That's a great question. I'm the mother to 2 daughters, and I've worked full-time while my husband and I have raised our daughters, and we can both tell you firsthand the challenges of making sure you've got quality child care at home when you leave to go to your job. So that is a real issue for so many working families and working mothers across our Commonwealth. If folks can't have affordable, quality child care, they can't leave to go do the work they so desperately need to raise their family. You know, in Frankfort, we've had so many budget challenges over these last several budget cycles. We've made lots of tough choices. But as our economy gets better, we need to look at programs that enable Kentucky workers to get the job they need so that they can be productive in their family. We're going to have lots of budget needs moving forward, but Jack and I will look at how we can serve Kentucky's workers to make sure that they have an opportunity to be employed. Thank you.
I'll offer both candidates a 30-second follow-up or rebuttal. Candidate Hampton. Good. Candidate Overly.
Thank you.
All right, then we'll move to our next question, and that is having to do with education as well, a topic we continue to return to. Do you support Kentucky's core academic standards, which are based on Common Core standards developed by the National Governors Association and the Council of Chief State School Officers, the national group of state superintendents and commissioners? And why or why not? And we'll begin with candidate Overly's response.
Bill, I talked about those core values and making sure that everyone gets access to high-quality education and how that is one of my driving principles. We have to ensure that Kentucky students are competitive with students across this country. And so Jack and I support high standards for Kentucky students. We know that since the Kentucky core standards have been implemented, our college readiness at high school has doubled. It's gone from 31% to 62%. So we are on the right path. Now, Jack and I also support decision-making at the local level because we want to make sure that students, teachers, and parents have impact into those standards. But we think Kentucky's on the right path, and we want to make sure that each child in Kentucky has access to a high-quality education. Thank you.
Thank you. And candidate Hampton, your response.
Well, education was the key to me escaping the inner city. No, there's no question about that. I ended up going to a truly great high school and college prep high school. So I understand the need for education. I do not support Common Core because from what I've seen of it, it dumbs down the curriculum, and our students are better than that. Now, if there has been improvement, we've still got a long way to go. Matt and I believe you don't reinvent the wheel, and if you're going to put a process in place, you benchmark the best. Common Core is not the best. The other thing about Common Core is it's too driven from the top down, and there's very little control at the local level. We believe the control should be at the local level as much as possible. The school boards, parents, making those decisions about where their kids go. And we also believe in parental choice so that parents can make the choices about where their children go to school and how best to educate them.
Thank you. Candidate Overly, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal if you choose.
Well, thank you. I think the results speak for themselves. We've doubled the number of kids in Kentucky who are college ready at graduation. Kentucky's core standards were developed by Kentuckians. They were developed by educators here in Kentucky. And while the Bevin campaign may not support Common Core or even Kentucky's high standards, we do know from published reports that Mr. Bevin has enriched himself from investing in companies that sell Common Core software.
Candidate Hampton.
We do not support Common Core because it's failing our students, and our Kentucky kids deserve better than they're getting. We need a system. We need to find the best and implement that here. Our blueprint, we talk about returning the control to the local level as much as possible, so that our kids will compete not just at the national level but also globally.
Thank you.
All right, gaps in achievement continue to persist in schools across Kentucky. What can be done to close those gaps, or what kind of support should Kentucky provide its teachers to help close those gaps? Candidate Hampton.
Well, to close the gaps say the question again, please.
The gaps in achievement in Kentucky schools, yes.
Well, that goes again to I go back again to the Common Core standards. If you're going to dumb down the standards, you'll never close the gap. Now, we may be comparing the students with other Common Core graduates, but I submit, from what I've seen of the curriculum based on what I learned, and I graduated high school in 1976, the students are far behind where they could be and where they should be. And I just simply believe, I have faith in our students. Students can learn anything if given the right curriculum. They can pick up anything. So I think the way to close those gaps is to challenge them, is to mentor them, is to give them tasking that is far beyond where you think they can go, because I believe they can achieve great things, just as I have in my own career.
Candidate Overly.
Well, thank you for another question about education, because education is such a big part of this race, and there's so much at stake for Kentucky's future around our education system. You know, when we talk about closing the gap in Kentucky, what we mean is how do we address those schools in our state that are consistently and persistently underperforming. You know, we've looked at a number of measures here in Kentucky to address those needs. And Jack and I believe that we must provide flexibility for school districts. We must look at the Districts of Innovation legislation that was passed in Frankfort to enable local communities to ensure that their children, that their students are getting the high quality public education they deserve. I point you to our jobs or to our education plan. Encourage you to look at that. Jack and I have set out how we intend to support public education by protecting funding for our public education systems. That's very different from the pure voucher system that the Bevin campaign would take Kentucky's public education to. And it would be devastating for public education here in our state. Thank you.
Time for rebuttal. Candidate Hampton.
Yes, I have found that in areas where, especially in low-income areas, minority students do very well in systems where there has been competition, where their parents are given a choice about where to educate their children. And certainly Kentucky's children deserve no less than that. The element of competition makes the school systems better. We are proposing not only vouchers but other things as well, but the bottom line is to return choice to the parents.
Candidate Overly.
When we talk about education, public education in Kentucky, the one point we can't leave out is how desperately we need more and better early childhood education opportunities and programs in our state. Jack and I are committed to making sure that we do historic improvement in the number of children who have access to those programs across the state. The research is clear, and we know that students that have access to those programs do better. Again, our opponents have said that early childhood education serves no purpose. It's another big contrast in this race.
And now to some questions about Kentuckians' health. And we know we have issues in our Commonwealth with that. Do you support the Affordable Care Act, also known in Kentucky as Connect, or Obamacare, as it is known as well, sometimes depending on where you are on the issue? Let's begin with Candidate Overly.
Well, Bill, I started out a number of years ago serving on the board of the local hospital in Paris, Kentucky, and I learned there firsthand about the needs, the medical needs of my community, the challenges of rural health care. And I think when we look at Kentucky's Connect system, we know that Kentucky has shown that if you take a program, if you take the political rhetoric and you put it aside, you do it the Kentucky way, you can do something that can truly help generations of Kentuckians to come. What we know is that on a national level, Kentucky has been heralded as the #1 state for implementing those programs here in Kentucky. Just last week I learned, as many of you did, that Kentucky now has the greatest number of uninsured since we implemented the Connect program here in our state. So Jack and I are committed to continuing the Connect program to make sure that Kentuckians have access to quality and affordable health care. Thank you.
Candidate Hampton, your response on the Affordable Care Act question.
The Obamacare system supposes that we as adults are incapable of making decisions for ourselves and our families. Matt and I, we view Kentuckians as adults. I believe you're all perfectly capable of making your own decisions. The Connect system is a website, it is a portal, and what Matt and I are proposing is moving people from the Connect to the national system, because Connect is simply a redundant system and we don't have the money to continue it. Connect is simply, it's like Travelocity for health care. And so the applause that came from doing a good website is fine, but again, at the bottom, at the underlying premise is that we're incapable of making our health care decisions, and many people across Kentucky, as well as the rest of the nation, are seeing their premiums increase. And I also want to point out that 80% of the people who signed up under Connect, in essence, signed up for Medicaid. And so you have now in Kentucky, 1/4 of all Kentuckians on Medicaid.
And response now, 30-second rebuttal from candidate Overly.
Well, let's put the rhetoric aside and let's look at the facts. In Kentucky, in our Connect system, people who use that system, there's a 1% charge. If we do away with that system and go to a federal exchange, there will be a 3.5% charge, which will, in essence, be a tax increase for Kentuckians. We don't want to see that happen. It's been estimated it will take $23 million to make that change, to do away with Connect. And my question for my opponent would be, where are you going to come up with those millions of dollars?
Candidate Hampton, your response.
Well, the question to my opponent would be, where will we come up with the dollars to continue the people on Medicaid, to continue to pay the bill that comes due at the end of 2016 or beginning of 2017 when the federal subsidies are gone. Matt and I, we believe in being good stewards of our money as well as Kentucky's money, and so let's look at how we can best save money, and the best way in this case is to move people, shift people to the federal exchange, which is the same system.
America's health rankings from the United Health Foundation ranks Kentucky 47th among other states. That puts us among the most unhealthy. What can be done to improve the overall health of Kentuckians? Candidate Hampton.
Oh gosh, well, as somebody who is actually not exercising as much as she used to, that's a good question. I think we just have to make Kentuckians aware of the benefits of eating well and exercising. Before I got into this, I was running half marathons on a somewhat regular basis. I'm not asking you all to run half marathons. But I do think we're unaware, though, of the benefits of just moving on a regular basis. So we just need to come up with some interesting ways to get Kentuckians moving and eating right. But whether I'm not sure that that's a government decision to do that, though, because we all make choices about what we do in our daily lives. And so we just need to work on that and come up with some way to want to encourage people to be more active.
Candidate Overly, what can be done to improve the overall health of Kentuckians?
You know, the single biggest thing that's happened here in Kentucky that will improve health outcomes for Kentuckians for generations to come is the implementation of the Connect system here in Kentucky and the corresponding expansion of Medicaid that Governor Beshear implemented. We now have the lowest uninsured rate since the implementation of that, and it will impact Kentuckians moving forward. You know, Jack and I are going to continue to monitor the expansion of Medicaid to see if it's something that we can afford going forward. But what we know now, based on the reports by the Deloitte consulting firm, is that Medicaid expansion is predicted to pay for itself. In fact, it is predicted to create tens of thousands of good-paying health care jobs right here in our state. And in the next 6 years, put close to $30 billion into Kentucky's economy. So right now, we have statistics that show that Kentucky can, in fact, afford it. Jack and I will continue to monitor that, but what we won't do is kick nearly 500,000 Kentuckians, our friends, our neighbors, and our relatives off their health care on day one because of something that may happen in 6 years.
Candidate Hampton, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Well, first of all, moving people from Connect to the federal exchange, they do not lose their health care. Again, Connect is just a website portal, so we're just shifting the administrative area. And second of all, if the Medicaid expansion is great for expanding jobs, then the answer to that would be to put everyone in Kentucky on Medicaid. And we simply know that that is not true. And so we need to do what we need to do so that people have private health insurance. And that, again, that goes back to making us a more business-friendly state so that these people have jobs and can have private health insurance.
Candidate Overly, 30 seconds to you.
Jack and I are committed to making sure that every Kentuckian has access to quality and affordable health care. We'll do our job as governor and lieutenant governor as we watch the state's budget to make sure that that is something that Kentucky can do moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. An amazing number here. This is like wiping out a good-sized town. About 8,900 adults die from tobacco-related illnesses in Kentucky each year. We spend $1.9 billion each year treating smoking-related illnesses in the Commonwealth. What will you do as Lieutenant Governor to try to decrease the rate of tobacco use as a way to improve the health of our citizens? Candidate Overly?
Well, thank you, Bill. You know, I'm so pleased to be joined by my colleague, Representative Susan Westrom, who's here in the audience with us tonight, who has worked so hard to educate people here in Kentucky about the dangers of secondhand smoke, the dangers of cigarette smoking. I've worked closely with Susan over the past number of years on smoking bans here in Kentucky. Jack and I are supportive of a smoking ban because we believe that there are so many health concerns around smoking, and we'll support that legislation moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Hampton, the smoking question.
Smoking. Well, again, we are blessed with free will. God gives us free will. And I don't like smoking. I don't smoke. But if people want to do that, that is their choice to do it. Now, what we can do, again, in private insurance, such as the private insurance that I had when I worked for Weyerhaeuser and International Paper, they had programs, smoking cessation programs, because they recognized the value of not smoking, and they tried to give incentives. The insurance companies tried to incentivize the smokers from smoking. So I do not agree with a smoking ban. Each business, it's up to them to decide if that's what they want to do. And then the rest of us decide if we want to patronize those businesses, and they either stay in business or go out of business. Free market. Matt and we believe in the free market. We believe in the free will of people to make their choices. And we'll just do our best to help you along the way, but we want to put you to work so that you have the funds to make your own choices.
Candidate Overly, you have 30 seconds if you choose.
You know, whether it's our Connect program, Medicaid expansion, helping Kentuckians curb their addiction to smoking, Jack and I are committed to a healthier workforce and a healthier Kentucky. Thank you.
Thank you. And Candidate Hampton, 30 seconds, if you need it. All right.
We invite you to share your thoughts and questions using hashtag KYDebate on Twitter. And we now have our first question from Twitter. It's about a new census data showing Kentucky's African Americans saw their average annual incomes drop by more than 11% one year. Charlena from Louisville asks what the candidates plan to do to level the playing field for African Americans. Candidate Hampton.
Well, what's good for Kentucky is good for African Americans. As a black female, I don't have a special definition of freedom or liberty. I simply don't. I'm just an American. And so what I want to do, and I've driven through the west end of Louisville, I've watched, I've observed the graffiti, the boarded up homes, but what I see is opportunity there. And so what I see is opportunity for the west end of Louisville to become the safest, coolest place in Kentucky. But it takes somebody showing them how that can happen. And I look forward to actually working with the people in the West End to show them the opportunities that they have to improve their own neighborhoods. And again, I keep going back to improving our business climate so that we can put more people in the West End as well as all across Kentucky, put people to work.
Candidate Overly.
Well, thank you for that question. You know, Kentucky can never reach her full potential unless and until every part of her does. We cannot leave any part of Kentucky behind as we move forward. As I said, Jack and I have released a jobs plan where we are going to focus as our top priority on growing more and better good-paying jobs for Kentuckians. Kentucky has reduced its number of unemployed dramatically over the past 8 years. We were over 11% when Governor Beshear took office, and today it's closer to 5%. It's lower than the national average. So we've done a great job in this state of attracting new businesses and creating jobs. But Jack and I will continue that work. We'll support our hometown businesses. We will help all communities across Kentucky reach success, and we won't stop until everyone who wants a job has access to one. Thank you.
Candidate Hampton, rebuttal.
Well, first I'll say that the unemployment numbers do not reflect the number of people who have simply stopped looking for work or cannot find work. It's the same sort of numbers games that we're seeing played out at the national level. But I will also say that the problems that I see in the minority communities are the same issues that I see in eastern Kentucky and in other counties where businesses have left. So again, it is so critical that you get someone in there in the governor's chair who knows a thing or two about, who has actually created jobs and who can improve our business climate.
Candidate Overly.
Well, thank you. Here in Kentucky, we received the Governor's Cup from Site Selection Magazine as being the #1 state in the union to come, relocate, build your business, and create jobs. Jack and I will continue to market the state aggressively, but we will also work to make sure that our employees here in our state have the skills they need to get the jobs that we bring to Kentucky. Thank you.
Thank you, and it's wonderful to have our audience engaged tonight with the Twitter questions that are coming in, and we have another question. Joe from Moorhead is asking, how do you plan to improve the infrastructure, such as the cell phone service, internet services, other technological advances that are desperately needed in Kentucky? Candidate Overly.
Well, that's a great question for Moorhead tonight. You know, Jack and I are committed to investing in Kentucky's infrastructure, and that's roads, it's bridges, but it's also our digital infrastructure. We're committed to continuing the efforts of the Beshear administration to build out that middle mile and to provide for high-speed broadband internet in communities all across Kentucky, because we cannot bring companies to Kentucky, to the rural parts of our state. They're simply not going to locate there if they can't go online, participate in e-commerce, and sell their products that way. So Jack and I will continue to make a priority of that public-private partnership that the Beshear administration has initiated to make sure that Kentuckians have access to high-speed broadband internet.
Candidate Hampton, technology in the Commonwealth.
Well, one of the reasons companies don't come is because there's a regulatory atmosphere that discourages companies from coming in and making investments themselves. And so Matt and I are committed to fighting against federal overreach. And what, we talk about that, and we see examples of that, the impact on the coal industry in eastern Kentucky. We see the impact now. It's going to affect our farms, where if there's a drainage on your farm, it's now a waterway and it can be regulated. So we are committed to pushing back against regulations, harmful regulations, and so that will increase the competition and will incentivize companies to come without government having to pay them to come.
Candidate Overly, 30 seconds if you choose.
You know, when it comes to technology, high-speed broadband internet, it's no longer a luxury. It's a necessity for Kentuckians. Kentucky ranks 47th in connectivity and 50th in internet speed. It's unacceptable. Jack Conway and I will not permit Kentucky to be left behind any longer.
Candidate Hampton.
I understand the importance of broadband, but I will say as I was growing up and couldn't afford a computer, I started with punch cards, but couldn't afford the computer resources, I actually worked for what I had. I didn't assume that someone was going to give that to me. But again, the infrastructure that we can put in place if we simply have the business climate that will attract investment naturally in our state, and Matt Bevin will make that happen.
A Kentucky state trooper was recently shot while conducting a traffic stop. Given that there are too many gun-related deaths in Kentucky from accidents, suicides, and murders, what can state leaders do to protect our citizens from these senseless deaths? Candidate Hampton.
Well, certainly education on firearms is the key. I'm a concealed carry owner, a licensed owner, as is my husband, as is Matt and his wife. And that comes with a great degree of education and responsibility when you decide to own a firearm. The answer to senseless deaths is not disarming good people, the people who follow the rules. However, the people who do own firearms need to just be aware of it's a grave thing when you decide to have firearms in your home. And my husband and I take that seriously, and we lock them up. If we have children in our home, we make sure they're locked up and that they're aware of the seriousness of firearms. But I think education is the key there to ensure that people are aware of the seriousness of owning firearms.
Candidate Overly, what can state leaders do to protect citizens from these senseless deaths?
Well, thank you, Vicki. I very much appreciate this question. First, I'd like to say to the family of Trooper Ponder how grateful I am to his service and how sorry I am about what happened. Having said that, tragedies happen in communities all across our country. And it takes state leaders to foster communication between police and the communities they serve. It also takes state leaders who are willing to stand up and say that our police officers need the training and they need the resources to be able to do their jobs effectively. Jack Conway, as our Attorney General and Chief Law Enforcement Officer, is just that leader. He is someone that has the relationships with people in law enforcement communities across the state to foster those conversations. Thank you.
Rebuttal, Candidate Hampton.
I've made a point for 2 or 3 years now for whenever I see a law enforcement officer making a point of thanking them for their service, because I know they put their lives on the line. They go out there and they may or may not come home, and so I truly appreciate what they've done. But I also see that a climate has been built in this country where we are painting our law enforcement people as the bad guys when they're not. There's certainly some bad apples, but the majority of them are not. And so I am committed to not only helping the climate with law enforcement, but also the people who feel that they might be bad apples.
Candidate Overly.
Well, as I mentioned, Jack Conway is our Attorney General. He's our Chief Law Enforcement Officer. He is the one who has spent the last 8 years building relationships with our law enforcement professionals across the state. And for that, the Fraternal Order of Police have endorsed Jack Conway for governor in this race. Jack and I are the ticket to help address these issues here in Kentucky. Thank you.
Rowan County Clerk Kim Davis has made national headlines by refusing to issue marriage licenses because she disagreed with the U.S. Supreme Court's same-sex marriage ruling. Do you agree with Davis's stand? And if you had been governor of the Commonwealth during the legal fight over same-sex marriage, what would you have done? Candidate Overly.
Well, thank you, Bill, for that question. You know, it is really unfortunate what's happened here in Kentucky and particularly in Rowan County. And I know that on both sides of this issue across our Commonwealth that passions are running very high. They have and they continue to be. But we are a nation of laws and no one is above the law and no one can ignore the order of a federal judge. Jack and I both believe that in a regular session of the Kentucky General Assembly, we could look at a narrowly tailored solution to be able to accommodate all parties. But we don't believe, as Governor Beshear has said, that we should have a special session of the General Assembly that would cost the lawmakers hundreds of thousands of dollars when we can do that in January. Thank you.
Candidate Hampton.
I agree with Kim Davis's, Matt and I side with Kim Davis because this is an issue of religious freedom. However, to say that it is the law of the land is questionable, because even though the Supreme Court, the questions we don't ask, and these questions need to be asked, first of all, is whether the Supreme Court, one of three co-equal branches of government, is the final arbiter on anything, because if that was true, I would still be a slave. And number two, does the Supreme Court in fact have the authority to overrule a state constitution as they did? Because in our state constitution, section 233A, we have defined marriage as between one man and one woman. Whichever side you agree on, that's how the voters decided. And so those are questions that still need to be resolved. But had I been governor, I would have simply just issued an order to change the form, to remove her name from the form, because her objection was issuing licenses that had her name on it. And our governor could have done that if he wanted to.
Candidate Overly, 30 seconds for a response.
The Supremacy Clause in the Federal Constitution makes clear that our federal Constitution and federal laws are supreme over the states, and Kentucky must comply with United States Supreme Court decisions. Having said that, Jack and I will support a narrowly tailored solution in a regular session of the Kentucky General Assembly that does not expose our hardworking Kentucky taxpayers to hundreds of thousands of dollars of additional expense.
Candidate Hampton, an additional response?
Yes, I think we've forgotten that the states trump the federal government. We have forgotten that. We have forgotten that the states gave power to create the federal government, and they should never rule supreme over the federal government. And so I just think it's worth asking the questions, because we have not asked the questions down the line, we find ourselves in this mess now.
Sexual harassment is a serious issue for women and men. We read about it happening in workplace, including the military, business, and most recently, state government. What can be done to tackle this important issue? Candidate Overly.
Well, thank you, Vicki. I appreciate the opportunity to address that question. Certainly with regard to the sexual harassment litigation that took place in the General Assembly, Jack and I both strongly condemn the behavior that was described in that lawsuit. Having said that, Jack and I both also believe that sexual harassment is a very serious issue. It's one that we take seriously. It's one that we will have a zero-tolerance policy for moving forward in our administration. I think if we want to go about changing the culture in Frankfort, as Jack and I are committed to do, we must encourage more women here in Kentucky to run for office, and I'm committed to doing that. Thank you.
Candidate Hampton.
Well, first of all, when Jack Conway was asked a similar question last week, he made a joke and said something about his female dog, which I found just a little trifling. But as Governor and Lieutenant Governor, Matt Bevin and I will set the climate to where if there is harassment, women know that we will have an open door policy. They will know that they will have a mechanism to address whatever happens so that their grievances can be properly addressed. And it starts at the top. The tone is always set at the top. As a plant manager, I did that. I set that tone from the top down. My employees knew that they could come talk to me about anything, and Matt and I will set that tone in our administration.
Candidate Overly.
Well, I watched that debate last week as well, and that's not the version that I heard. What I found reprehensible about that discussion last week was Matt Bevin's false attacks on me. And that's why even Kentucky Republicans call Matt Bevin a pathological liar.
Candidate Hampton.
Well, Matt and I don't have to resort to that sort of thing to make our point, because we actually have a pretty good plan. But I do find it interesting that that my opponent here fought very hard during that sexual harassment case to have her deposition sealed. And unfortunately, the clock ran out and she did not have to give a deposition, but she would not testify in that case until she knew her deposition was sealed. And I just throw that out there.
This will have to be a quick answer, 30 seconds from each candidate. Women continue to earn less than men despite similar education levels and job duties. In Kentucky, the gap is 80%. That is, women earn 80% of what men earn in similar jobs. What, if anything, can be done at the state level to address that inequity? Candidate Hampton.
Well, some part of that inequity is because many women drop out to have children and they lose time in the job market. But I would point women to, and girls especially, to the industries where they are high earners. I turned down very good job offers in 1985 from 2 car companies, and those salaries they offered me then would have been great today. So just simply turning girls on to science, technology, engineering, and math, and just get them in those high-paying jobs.
Thank you. And Candidate Overly, 30 seconds.
Sure. Well, I've talked a lot tonight about our jobs plan. You know, Jack and I are committed to bringing more and better jobs, and certainly that will help all Kentucky workers. But if you want to talk specifically about women, so many Kentucky women, so many single moms earn minimum wage. And one thing we can do is increase the minimum wage here in Kentucky so that folks can earn a living wage. And Jack and I are committed to doing that.
We now want to give each candidate the opportunity for a closing statement. A reminder to both of you that you have 2 minutes for your closing remarks. We will begin with Candidate Hampton.
Matt and I believe that Kentucky is ready for real leadership. And we believe that Kentuckians are ready to put people above politics. I've watched politics for over 15 years now, and I've watched the other side, and I don't like the hoops that they go through to twist words to make the other side look bad. Matt and I simply put our plan out there. We have real-world business experience to help put Kentucky back on track. We have leadership. We are both military officers. Matt has created tons of jobs. I have worked in the private sector. I have hired people. And we have a comprehensive vision to tackle our economy. We will fight Kentucky overreach. That is so important, especially when you see the impact of the EPA on our coal jobs, soon to impact our farmers, both huge pieces of Kentucky industry. And I offer my leadership to help Matt turn Kentucky around. I have over 30 years of leadership both in the military and the private sector. I'm a process improvement engineer by degree and by bent, and I offer my time and talent to Kentuckians because I want to see Kentucky thrive. I look so forward to meeting everyone out there. I'm campaigning going from one end of the state to the other. I look forward to meeting you. I look forward to talking with you. I look forward to inspiring you because I want you to see Kentucky as I see it. Just a beautiful state with so much potential, but timing is everything, and now is the time to elect a man like Matt Bevin with his vast experience and knowledge. Thank you.
Your closing remarks, Candidate Overly.
Well, I'd like to thank the sponsors for hosting this debate tonight, and thank you for those of you at home watching as well. I appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation about Kentucky's future. The fact that all of the candidates running for Lieutenant Governor this year are women is a terrific thing for Kentucky. But I hope you've seen tonight that the choice in this race is clear. Jack and I understand Kentucky. We've delivered for Kentucky, and we have a plan to move Kentucky forward. But on so many important issues, there's a clear contrast between Jack Conway and Matt Bevin. Jack and I believe that early childhood education is critical for an individual's success and for all of our long-term economic growth. Matt Bevin says it, quote, serves no purpose. Jack and I believe that every Kentuckian deserves access to quality and affordable health care. Matt Bevin says he would kick nearly 500,000 Kentuckians off their health care. And Jack and I believe that Kentucky deserves a governor it can trust. But Matt Bevin is still hiding his tax returns. And on so many issues, he hasn't been truthful about where he stands. I talked earlier tonight about growing up on my family farm in Bourbon County and the values I learned from my parents: honesty, hard work, the importance of giving back. Those are the same values I've lived my entire life, and the same values I will bring to serving as your next Lieutenant Governor. Jack Conway and I would be honored to have your support, and I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'd like to thank the candidates for standing for these questions tonight. Thank Midway University for this beautiful venue that we've enjoyed, and the League of Women Voters of Kentucky for being a part of tonight's debate as well.
And we would like to join WLKY and WKYT for a debate between the gubernatorial candidates. It will be Sunday, October 25th at 6 o'clock on the campus of Eastern Kentucky University.
We'll do this again, right? And don't forget, October 5th is the final day to register to vote in time for the November 4th general election. For more information about the election, you can always go to WKYT.com and WLKY.com.
We thank you for watching, and good night. A round of applause for the ladies.
Thank you. Good night.